Installing a CCTV security camera at a house or business is one of the most effective crime prevention tools used today. They not only deter criminals, but when a crime is committed, the footage can be reviewed and the culprit identified. But in some cases, the footage is too grainy, or the person responsible for the crime manages to hide their face, and despite the footage, they're never taken into custody. Number 10. In some crime cases, CCTV footage serves as a poignant reminder of a life that has been lost, as is the case with footage that's been released by the police in India after a newlywed couple went missing, only for the groom to be found deceased shortly after. In the footage from the indoor home of Raja and Sonam Raghuvanshi, Raja can be seen coming out of the house with a bag over his shoulder and a suitcase in hand. He then gets on a scooter driven by someone else and heads out to the airport, where he then meets up with Sonam before the couple flew out to Meghalaya. Raja was the last of 3 brothers to get married. He was in charge of the family's transport business before his disappearance, and according to his family, he was a responsible and diligent man who was excited to start life with Sonam. Sonam hails from Kushwan Nagar in Indore, and at the time ran most of her family's business while also being in charge of the accounting, billing, and supervision of staff. Her marriage to Raja was an arranged one, and she seemed happy with the union, but it seemed that she also had feelings for another man named Raj, who once worked with her and is known to live near her family's home. Raja and Sonam met through a marriage directory in October of 2024. Each of their families decided that they would be a good match, and after they met for the first time, they agreed to get married. They tied the knot on the 11th of May, and on the 20th of that month, they set out on their honeymoon. But what happened next left both families devastated. On the 23rd of May, they checked out of their accommodation, and when no one could get a hold of them, they were reported missing. A search ensued, and for more than a week, nothing was found. Then, on the 2nd of June, Raja was found deceased in a gorge about 12 miles away, and 6 days later, Sonam suddenly emerged unharmed. It would then come to light that Raja's life had been ended by a group of men who were hired to carry out a hit, and they were taken into custody. Shortly after, Raj was also tracked down and arrested, and the reality of the case started to unfold. When all was said and done, 8 people were in custody, and the police had the unenviable task of figuring out how they were involved and to what degree. What is certain, though, is that Sonam orchestrated a hit on her husband, since she's confessed to this to the police. But the mystery is far from solved, thanks to one discovery that was made during a search. As is tradition, when a Hindu couple gets married, the bride is gifted a necklace, and when this necklace is placed around the bride's neck, it symbolizes the beginning of their union, much like rings in traditional Western weddings. But during one search, it was discovered that Sonam owned 2 Hindu marriage necklaces, and it's been speculated that she and Raj got married while she was in hiding after arranging for Raja's life to be ended. Number 9. The mystery of the murder of 2 men, Kyle Van Komen and Kevin Nelson, in Ogden, Utah, is one that persists as investigators have been unable to identify their attackers, despite having obtained CCTV footage of these men that shows them outside of Kyle's house before the attack. In December of 2016, Kyle shared a house with a few other men, 2 of whom were his brothers. The police were familiar with the residence, as it had gained a reputation for loud parties, but the group that lived there never caused any trouble, and they had a good relationship with their neighbors. On the night of the 9th of December that year, Kyle was supposed to go bowling with 2 of his brothers and a few friends, but his one brother, Brock, stated he wanted to get something to eat before they headed out. He and his stepbrother left the house and traveled to a supermarket to buy some microwavable food since it was cheap and convenient. What they didn't know was that 3 men had been outside the residence for some time, hiding in the bushes and waiting for the right moment to strike. CCTV footage of the group shows that they were wearing plastic masks, and as soon as Brock and his stepbrother stepped out, they approached the house with firearms drawn. But they didn't just enter the house, as they first looked through the windows to see who was left inside. The trip to the supermarket was a short one that only lasted about 10 minutes, and when Brock returned, he must have been astounded by what he found. It would later be revealed that as the two men left, one of their neighbors, Kevin Nelson, had walked over to the house to chat to Kyle and his roommates, which was not unusual since they got along well. The police were called to the house at 7:58 p.m., about 13 minutes after Brock left for the store. When they entered the house, they found Kyle and Kevin lying deceased on the floor. In the backyard, they found a third man who'd been injured with a firearm, but he was still miraculously alive. The third man was rushed to the hospital, where he was treated and would eventually recover. Investigators scoured the house and surrounding areas for more than 24 hours in hopes that they would find clues to the attackers' identities. Despite obtaining CCTV footage, they were unable to see their faces and hence had no idea who they were or why the crime was committed. The police released the CCTV footage to the public as they felt that someone in the neighborhood might recognize them. They were clearly familiar with the targeted house in some way, but no one came forward with any additional information. Investigators did find distinctive footprints outside the house and managed to find several shell casings inside the house that they hoped would narrow their search, but this was not the case. At one point, they interviewed a potential suspect, but he was quickly ruled out. The prevailing theory is that the three men had been at the house before, likely during a party, and while there, they may have seen items that they believed were valuable. They then returned to the house to steal these items, and in the process, ended Kyle and Kevin's lives. The investigation into this mystery is ongoing, and anyone with useful information is asked to contact the Weber County dispatchers at 801-629-8221. Number 8. Police have been on the hunt for a criminal who's been dubbed the Little Rock Killer since August of 2020, but have been unable to identify him as of yet. The man in question has been caught on CCTV, but has managed to remain elusive. The first of the attacks carried out by this man occurred on the 24th of August 2020. Just after 2 a.m. that morning, a member of the public called the police to report that they found a man deceased in the front yard of a house in Little Rock, Arkansas. Investigators found that the man, who was identified as 64-year-old Larry McChristian, had been attacked with a sharpened blade, and part of his crime was caught on surveillance footage. A $10,000 reward is being offered to anyone who comes forward with information leading to Larry's attacker's identity, but to date, no witnesses have added anything useful. But this was only the beginning of a terrifying crime spree in the area. On the 23rd of September that year, a friend of 62-year-old Jeff Welsh decided to stop by his house near the 12th Street substation for a visit, but when he arrived, he came upon a gruesome scene. Jeff was found on his porch, having been attacked with a blade, and he was no longer alive. The next part of this case involves the killer's only female victim, 43-year-old Deborah Walker. On the 11th of April 2021, she was walking along 19th and Marshall Streets when she was approached by a man who she'd never seen before, and out of nowhere, he produced a blade which he then used to attack her. Luckily for Deborah, police officers happened upon her while she was stumbling around in disbelief at what had just happened, and she was rushed to a nearby hospital. She managed to survive and provided a description of the man, stating that he's an African American and stands over 6 feet tall. The last of his victims lost their life on the 12th of April 2021. On that day, 40-year-old Marlon Franklin was attacked just a block away from the attack on Deborah, and less than 24 hours later. Following this incident, the police announced they believed the crimes were related, and hence they were dealing with a serial killer who was operating in the Little Rock community. With no leads to follow, the CCTV footage was made available to the public, and it showed the attacker walking down a street before suddenly turning around and walking in the opposite direction. Unfortunately, due to the quality of the surveillance footage, the killer has never been identified, and investigators are still hopeful that someone will recognize him and come forward so he can be made to face justice for his actions. Number 7. 45-year-old Luke John Talega is at the center of a mystery that continues to baffle the police in Australia. But they do believe that several witnesses could help progress the case of his murder, and they've released CCTV images of 2 women, but they've yet to come forward. Hence, the case remains unsolved at this point. The The last time that anyone saw Luke alive was at around 10 p.m. on the 31st of May, 2025. At 9 a.m. on the 2nd of May, Hobart police officers responded to a call from a garbage contractor who found Luke's deceased body in an industrial-sized bin behind a Salvation Army store on Percy Street. Since the bin is located close to a hair salon, the contractor at first assumed that he was looking at a mannequin that was used for displays in the salon, but upon closer inspection, he realized it was not a mannequin. It never is. An autopsy was performed, and strangely, Luke's body showed no signs of injury, and it was assumed he'd accidentally fallen into the bin and then passed away, but the possibility of foul play has not been ruled out. But Luke's family was left confused by the fact that he was found in a bin. Hence, they provided investigators with a few photos in hopes that someone saw him that morning and could shed light on his last movements before he lost his life. His children were the last people to see him alive during a visit 2 nights earlier, which ended at around 10 p.m. No one knows where Luke went after leaving the house, and even more perplexing is the fact that he somehow ended up in the bin. Investigators did reveal that the area behind the Salvation Army shop is often frequented by homeless people, and they were aware that Luke had been struggling in recent months, leading to him becoming homeless. Hence, it's been suggested he was sleeping in the bin and then suffered a medical episode which resulted in his passing. The authorities went door to door, speaking to people who lived in the area and checking CCTV cameras for any potential leads. They were able to obtain footage proving that Luke took a bus from Tollard Drive at around 4:30 p.m. on the 30th of May, and as he gets on, a woman dressed in a white hoodie follows close behind him. She got off the bus at the Shoreline Hotel parking lot. Footage from the inside of the bus shows a woman in a red top waving at him, but it's unknown whether they knew each other. To be clear, these 2 women are in no way believed to be connected to Luke's passing, but the police would like to speak to them to gather as much information about his last movements as possible. They've also stated that they would like to make contact with another woman who was seen in the footage standing near a store on Percy Street at around 7:50 on the 1st of June. It's believed that she may have spoken to Luke at some point, or may have seen which direction he was walking in. For now, none of these 3 women have been identified, and the police have asked that anyone who recognizes them or has any further useful information on Luke's case come forward by contacting them at 1-800-333-000. Number 6. The police in Leighton, South London, England, have identified at least 20 witnesses who were present when 18-year-old Alex Ajanaku's life was ended by an unknown individual, and they've appealed to them to come forward. The incident occurred at around 1:25 a.m. on the 1st of September 2021, when Alex and a few of his friends decided to attend an illegal rave that was being held in Leighton. At some point in the night, he and his friends decided to take a break and sat down on a bench, which is located on Beaumont Estate. Moments later, someone in a black Kia Sportage drove past, and while doing so, discharged a firearm at the group. Alex was hit, and unfortunately he passed away from his injuries. Investigators later revealed that the car was stolen from Chingford on the night of the 16th of August, almost 2 weeks before Alex was attacked. On the 3rd of September, a member of the public contacted the police to inform them of a burnt-out car that was found in Walthamstow. And when investigators arrived, they quickly determined that it was the vehicle used in the attack, which was caught on CCTV camera that night. In the footage, the car was seen as the driver makes their getaway after committing the crime. They can be seen turning down several streets in the area, and at one point they miss their turnoff and have to back up after hitting a speed bump at speed. After the footage was released to the public, a 43-year-old man was identified as a suspect. He was tracked down and detained, but after being questioned, it was determined that he wasn't responsible, and he was free to go. But the police have also released images of 20 people who were in the area when the crime was committed, and they're certain that at least one of them must know something that could help move the case forward. It's also been announced that a £20,000 or $26,000 reward is being offered to anyone who provides police with information, but no such information has been received. The motive for the crime remains unknown, and the case remains under investigation. But without further evidence being found, Alex's attacker remains unidentified. Number 5. The person or people responsible for the murder of a well-known British criminal, 65-year-old John Goldfinger Palmer, seemingly knew what they were doing on the day that they ended his life, since they carried out the act in the only area on his property that is not covered by CCTV cameras. Palmer was implicated in a gold heist that was carried out at Heathrow, but he managed to avoid prosecution, which earned him the moniker Goldfinger. At one point, he was considered to be the wealthiest criminal in all of Britain, having amassed a fortune of over £300 million, or around $402 million. At the time, it was the biggest robbery that had ever been carried out in Britain, and most of the gold was never found. The attack on Palmer took place at around 5:30 p.m. on the 24th of June 2015, while he was at home in Brentwood, Essex. His attackers entered the property by jumping over a garden fence, and after they fled, Palmer managed to walk towards his house but collapsed before reaching it, and he passed away. When the police arrived, it was assumed that he'd passed away from natural causes, since he'd recently undergone keyhole surgery on his chest. But when an autopsy was performed, it was discovered he'd been attacked with a firearm, and the property was searched. That's when it was discovered that the attackers had been watching him through a small hole in the fence, and they waited for the perfect moment to strike. In CCTV footage from the house, Palmer can be seen riding through his property on a small vehicle, and it's clear that he had no idea of the horrific crime that was about to take place. His partner, Christina Ketley, believes that the person responsible for the attack had been following him, and they managed to create a hole in the fence from where they kept an eye on Palmer until he was in the spot that was not covered by cameras. Many people feel that his life was ended due to his involvement in the 2015 Hatton Garden raid, in which 73 safety deposit boxes were emptied of their contents and £14 million worth of valuables and cash was stolen. Since Palmer was illiterate, he had a habit of recording conversations he had with his fellow criminals, who may have seen these recordings as potential evidence that could be used against them if they were to fall into the hands of the police. But this isn't the only theory as to what the motive was. Some people have pointed to the fact that Palmer was responsible for scamming as many as 17,000 people out of their money thanks to a timeshare racket that was carried out in Tenerife. The victims were convinced to pay deposits for apartment contracts that were then found out to not exist. For his involvement, Palmer was sent to jail for 8 years, but he continued to run the scam while he was incarcerated. After his release from prison, he had no choice but to reconnect with a few dangerous individuals who were members of the Russian mafia, since they were in the process of taking over many of his territories while he was behind bars. Furthermore, he was being sought by the police in Spain, who had also charged him over the Tenerife scam, just weeks before his life was ended. Many people who were close to Palmer stated that he was considering cooperating with prosecutors, and that the charges against him would be dropped if he agreed to reveal the names of his co-conspirators. Hence, many of his friends believe his life was ended to ensure his silence. Number 4. When some crimes are committed, the police are at a loss as to a motive, as was the case in an attack that was carried out against 36-year-old David Dick in Melbourne, Australia in 2017, which cost him his life. David is described by his family as a fun-loving and caring man who had a huge personality, though it should be noted that he had a long criminal history that may have led to the attack against him. The incident occurred in the parking lot of the Westfield Doncaster shopping mall at around 6:10 a.m. on the 3rd of February that year. David was on his way to work, and he would have believed it to be a normal day, just like any other, but that was about to change. According to his family, he would walk through the shopping mall at the same time every day to get to work, and hence his attacker may have been aware of his schedule. In CCTV footage, a man can be seen waiting for David to exit an elevator, and as soon as he does, he produces a long, bladed weapon, which he then uses to end his life. But the attacker was also injured in the ensuing scuffle, and investigators were able to track him for a short distance before the trail went cold. It's believed that this was a targeted attack, but the motive remains unclear, and will likely remain unknown until the man in the footage is tracked down. Footage from the day before the incident shows the same young man carrying the same weapon in a yellow bag, present at the mall, and seemingly stalking out the area where he planned to commit the crime. Hence, it's been speculated that he was hired to end David's life, or that he had personal reasons for doing so. The footage has now been made available in case anyone recognizes the man in question. Number 3. The family of 69-year-old Jeanette Moss is desperate for answers more than a decade after her life was ended, as no suspects have ever been named in her case, and it remains unsolved to this day. Jenny, as she was known to those close to her, is known to have visited a shopping center in Melbourne, Australia, just hours before she was attacked, as is evidenced by CCTV footage that shows her and a friend arriving at the mall, and then leaving again a short while later. She was supposed to visit one of her neighbors the next day for a catch-up visit, and when she failed to arrive, her neighbor decided to go over to her apartment to check on her, and what she found there changed her life forever. The woman, Jeanette, entered the apartment using a spare key that had been given to her, and at first she couldn't find Jenny, but when she entered the bedroom, she found her lying on the floor deceased. It was clear that she'd been attacked since a piece of bedsheet was wrapped around her neck, and Jeanette immediately contacted the police. The friend who's seen in the footage stated that earlier that day they went to the gym to work out, and she never imagined that she'd be the last person to see her alive. It's believed that the attacker managed to enter the apartment by pressing the building's intercom buttons, or that they followed a fellow resident through the doors after they were unlocked. It's also been speculated that they managed to get in via the building's fire escape. The building was fitted with CCTV security cameras, but unfortunately they weren't operational at the time, and hence no footage of the culprit was available. When the police arrived, they found Jenny's TV was still on, and it was obvious that she'd been sitting on her couch since the sheets were still indented. The groceries that she'd brought home were scattered on the ground, suggesting a struggle had taken place. They also found a spanner lying on her kitchen bench, and Jeanette would later reveal that Jenny had been complaining about a leak under the kitchen sink, and it's likely why the spanner was being used. Strangely, investigators found that the dishwasher was still open. Empty beer bottles had been left out, and a half-empty bottle of red wine was sitting on the kitchen bench. This struck her family as odd, since she always kept her apartment very clean and was only known to drink white wine. Another baffling detail soon emerged. Jenny's family realized that her ring was missing, but that the rest of the jewelry she'd been wearing remained untouched. But it is known that she'd been selling some of her jewelry, since she insisted on paying for her 70th birthday celebrations. This has led investigators to believe that someone may have caught wind of the fact that she had a lot of jewelry, and this was the motive for her life being ended. But this remains speculation, as it's not been proven. A $1 million reward is on offer for information leading to an arrest, but Jenny's case has since gone cold, and only time will tell if her attacker will ever be apprehended. Number 2. In February of 2011, 60-year-old prominent horse owner and trainer Les Samba was in Melbourne, Australia for a yearling sale at Oaklands Junction when he was attacked and his life was ended. But more than 14 years later, the case remains unsolved. Witnesses described seeing Les leave the Crown Metropole Hotel that day, and others stated that they saw him running away from his attacker after being wounded, but he collapsed, allowing the attacker to catch up with him and end his life in the middle of a street. During the resulting investigation, cartridges from a different weapon were found, suggesting that more than one person was involved in the crime. As for a motive, many people feel that Les's life was ended due to his involvement with Ron Medich, with whom he'd entered a partnership with a horse called Sea Lord. Medich was implicated of being involved in ending the life of a property developer called Michael McGurk in 2009, and at the time, he'd been released on bail while awaiting the start of his trial. At one point, a jockey called Danny Nikolic was considered a suspect since he and Les's daughter Victoria had been married, but their marriage fell apart about 18 months before the attack took place. According to many sources, Les had been interfering in the divorce settlement, and it was speculated that Nikolic may have hired someone to end Les's life, but no evidence has been found to implicate him. He also provided an alibi stating he was in Sydney at the time, and this checked out. He added that he couldn't speculate as to why Les's life was ended, since he didn't have too much to do with him, and hence knew very little about his day-to-day life. Nikolic's brother was questioned, and devices including cell phones and computers were seized from his property. He was jailed in Fiji after it was discovered that he was involved in the smuggling of illegal substances and weapons, but it remains unknown whether he was involved in the attack. But there is another aspect of this case that has left investigators baffled. CCTV footage shows Les leaving the Crown Metropole Hotel on the night of the attack. He then traveled to Middle Park where his attacker lay in wait, and no one knows why he decided to go there. It's been speculated that his attacker managed to lure him to the park with the intention of ending his life, but this remains pure speculation. A $1 million reward was arranged for information leading to the attacker's identity. And 2 years after the fact, someone called the police in Victoria and provided them with crucial information. A year later, police revealed their belief was that Les was attacked over a $200,000 debt to an organized crime syndicate that was unpaid. The mystery caller was urged to call back, but it's now believed that they're no longer alive thanks to foul play. Number 1. Gang violence is an ongoing and growing problem all over the world. While these gangs often end the lives of opposing gang members, innocent people sometimes end up as victims, as was the case with two men, 29-year-old Adam and 22-year-old Ayol Akwi, whose lives were ended on the 11th of February, 2023. It's now been revealed by the police in Melbourne, Australia, that the two men were likely not the intended targets of the attack that ended their lives, and they were mistaken for rival gang members. On that night, the police were contacted and told that an incident had taken place at an address in Wyndham Vale in Melbourne, and that 3 men were seriously injured. Upon their arrival, they found Adam and Ayol had passed away from their injuries, and a third man, a 23-year-old who's not been named, was badly hurt. Several other people were present at the house where the incident occurred, but thankfully they were unharmed, which the police described as miraculous. After the crime scene was processed, investigators started looking for CCTV footage from the area and have released several different videos in hopes that someone will recognize the 2 men responsible. In recordings from minutes before the attack, 3 cars could be seen stopping on a street a short distance away from the house. Several men could be seen getting out of the vehicles to have a discussion, possibly after one of the men spotted Adam and Ayol and mistook them for their rivals. Then, at around 2:45 a.m., several vehicles pull up to the house, and it's believed that 5 men attacked the 2 victims in the garage. Further footage from before the attack was found at the Werribee gas station and shows 2 men exiting a black Toyota Estima before filling the car with gasoline. Another car that's believed to be involved was seen later at a fast food drive-in in Laverton North, and CCTV footage shows that it's a blue Toyota Camry with a distinctive silver hood. Unfortunately, none of these gang members could be identified, as they were still wearing face masks that were used during the crime. The men from the gas station footage are described as the first having a slim build, and he could be seen wearing a gray jumper with a red hood, black Nike pants, Nike slides, and a face mask. The second also has a slim build and was wearing a black hoodie with black pants and Nike sneakers. Several appeals have been made to the public for anyone who recognizes these men or the vehicles they were traveling in to come forward, but no one has, either because they're afraid of being retaliated against by the gang, or because the men were able to completely hide their identities. Nevertheless, investigators are hopeful that someone with information will decide to do the right thing and contact them to report what they know. They've also added that no tip should be considered insignificant, as even the slightest detail could lead to a break in the case. If you or anyone you know recognizes the men in this footage, you're asked to contact Crime Stoppers at 1-800-333-000. Anyone submitting a tip can remain anonymous if they wish to do so. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.